Today I have with me Christina Botnari, who is the host of our Classical Music Hour, which is heard every day at 12 noon, New York and Miami time, and also 8 p.m. Christina has been nice enough to bring to us Deborah Johnson, who is a very interesting lady. She's a composer, a pianist, a vocalist, an author, and a speaker. Deborah does an awful lot. So I'm going to turn it over to Christina Botnari to introduce us to Deborah Johnson and tell us a little bit about Deborah. Christina, how are you today?
I'm fine, James. Thank you for hosting us. And yes, we have Deborah Johnson today with us. As you said, she's a composer, pianist, vocalist, author, motivational speaker. She has over a dozen albums, 3 original musicals. She's a published author and composer that makes Deborah a part of an elite group of women entertainers. As I said, she's a composer, motivational speaker, one of the best in the world. So, James, please meet Deborah Johnson.
Okay.
Hello, Deborah.
Well, hi.
Deborah, how are you?
I am doing great.
Deborah, we're broadcasting from Mauritius, our studios in Jupiter, Florida, and we're doing this show today. I'm in Miami, overlooking Biscayne Bay, so that leaves the last question. Where are you?
I am presently in Southern California.
Oh, wow.
We're across the country. It's amazing we can do this, huh?
Yes. I went to law school in Northern California in Sacramento.
Mm-hmm. Did you? Which law, at Davis or whereabouts?
University of the Pacific.
Oh, wonderful.
I went to McGeorge School of Law at University of the Pacific. Yes. And I will tell you one thing. My constitutional law professor is today on the United States Supreme Court. So.
Wow.
Yes. You never know.
Good to know.
Yes.
You never know.
Deborah, I have had a chance to look at a little sketch of a musical that apparently you have maybe even turned into a book. I don't know. And I think it's called TSARINA. Is that correct?
That is correct. It's just a musical. Well, although I wrote the book to it, a musical has a book alongside it for performing on stage. But yeah, I wrote all the music and the book.
A musical. I've been to many musicals. I grew up in Long Island, New York. My parents used to take me once or twice a year to Broadway, and usually we would go to musicals. Musicals seem very difficult because you have songs interposed during the performance, and they have to have a certain feel and certain lyrics and a certain rhythm to them in order to kind of fit in with the story that you're trying to tell. You know, it's not easy to be telling a story and all of a sudden music comes on and people are dancing and jumping around and going up and down stairs and doing like the Rockettes at Radio City Music Hall. That's not so easy. How did you ever get into doing musicals? And let me also ask you, are you the one that writes the music for these musicals?
Yes, I wrote all the songs except for I co-wrote one of the songs to TSARINA, and you've done your homework, so you know what's involved with music and how you break into song. But the most important part of a musical is the songs need to move the story forward. And that's a challenging thing. I'm a songwriter. I love to write songs, and I like to write songs that will walk away from a musical, that people go out the theater singing and loving and want to maybe even do other places. But to be able to have the songs that will help move your story forward is very important. And as you're putting them within the script and within the story, then it's a much smoother transition.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Wow. How many musicals have you written?
I have written 3 musicals to date, and I'm actually a co-writer with one of the songs in another one that's a published musical. So that's how many. And I don't know if I'll write another one. They're huge projects, so I love writing them. But to get them launched and to get them on theaters, they cost a lot of money to launch, and to and they take a lot of time. So.
Yes. Well, I have, as an American, I have always associated musicals with happy times and upbeat
Right.
times and fun times. We've had musicals like Showboat in Oklahoma and, many, many musicals. But we've also had musicals like Cabaret,
Right.
which were set in Nazi Germany and the advent of fascism and things like that. That wasn't so happy. That wasn't so upbeat.
Right.
And
Right.
but as I say, musicals always seem to be lively and happy. I read your synopsis, and of course, everyone knows the story of the abdication of Tsar Nicholas II and
Right.
his eventual execution down in a basement. And I
Right.
think the name of the town is Ekaterinburg or something along those lines.
Right.
And obviously, that was very tragic. I've read the story. I've read the book told by one of the witnesses that bullets were flying around this room,
Mm.
that these little girls, the Tsar's daughter, were being killed, his
Yes.
son, his wife, and a few other people. I think their cook and a few of the people that were in their entourage were also killed. And then, of course, they were buried, I think, in various places. And I think in 1998, they ended up being buried in the famous cathedral, I think, of I forget, St. Peter and St. Paul. Is that in Moscow?
Right. Right. Right.
Yes, they were there. And
All
to
right.
be perfectly honest with you, that it's a little bit tragic. That's more
Yes.
like a
Exactly.
tragedy than a comedy. Okay, I don't
It,
see anything too comic in
no.
that situation. Yes.
Well, there are moments of comedy. It's fact and fiction, coming together. But
Yes.
really, the this is Les Mis meets Dr. Zhivago. I focused on
Yes.
the
Yes.
the actual love story. What attracted me to this story to begin with was
Yes.
their incredible love story, and they got married for love. They didn't go into just an arranged marriage. They wrote letters to each other. Reading those letters, it was just amazing that they kept that love alive through this whole time, this whole journey of even their eventual demise and death. And they loved one another deeply. And that's what attracted me to this story. It's a love story, and it's tragic, but it's
Well,
an amazing love story.
I
So,
know that Queen Victoria was opposed to this marriage because
oh yeah.
she wanted Tsar Nicholas to marry somebody who would have been more politically advantageous than
Ah.
Alex, who I think was a German princess, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, but actually, Queen Victoria was Alex's grandmother. I think, well, she was related to her. They were
Yes,
all kind of related to each other.
that's where the hemophilia comes from.
Exactly. They intermarried and all of that, and she was very, very afraid of that. And the end of Act One ends with a very emotional song, "My Son Must Not Die." I mean, it really affected her. And that's what really affected her making some of the choices that she made, because she was panicked. She was afraid. And she didn't, her son was the coming heir. And she was very, very afraid of all of, the implications of that. So.
Well, it's interesting because when I picked this synopsis up, you start with what I would call a flashback. And
Yes,
you say
yes.
that Nick, Alex, and family are alone in the basement. I was wondering, what's this all about?
Right,
And I know what basement you're talking about now, okay? Or alone in the basement,
right,
thinking at last that they are feeling secure.
right.
And Nick, who I take it is Tsar Nicholas II, and
Exactly.
Alex, who was, I think, named Alex, but then she
Yeah,
changed her name to the Russian Alexandra when she became the Empress,
right.
sing a chorus of "How Did We Get Here?" And
Yes.
then there was a barrage of gunfire, which is depicted in that one particular book. And
Right.
then there is a blackout. So you start sort of with the ending
Yes.
as the beginning. All right.
Yeah, I bookended the show with this. So,
Yeah.
and they really felt like they've got this hope, and they've got, they're hopeful that they're going to survive all of this, and they're going to be able to keep going. And they've got the whole family with them right here. So
Yes.
yes, it's the lyric to that. How did we get here? How did it come to this? A love like ours that came so far, no time to reminisce. And
Yes.
then after our lifetime, our love won't let us down. So they're really still focused on their love. So,
Now, Deborah, I have to be honest with you, and I have to be realistic with you.
mm-hmm.
This czar, while he was ruling, was not that much of a romantic kind of czar. He wasn't that romantic kind of guy. In fact, his enemies called him Bloody Nicholas, and you don't get that sort of a nickname by being a fun type of guy. And
Right,
he had anti-Semitic pogroms, which we've all heard about. We've all studied here in the United States, the
right,
Jewish pogroms.
right.
He had something called Bloody Sunday. We all know that before the Bolshevik Revolution, there was a prior revolution in 1905.
Mm-hmm.
He had violently suppressed that, to put it mildly.
Right,
He had executed his political opponents.
right.
He had gotten Russia mixed up in World War I, and then he was one of the leaders, actually out in the field, one of the leaders in World War I.
Mm-hmm.
Many people feel that he had taken Russia from either being a world power or being an imminent world power
Mm-hmm.
to economic disaster,
Yes.
international disaster. He had taken the country down.
Mm-hmm.
And his wife had been greatly influenced by a man who you have in your story named
Right.
Grigory Rasputin.
Right. Right.
And yes, it's a love story between those two people, but
Right.
it was sort of a mess. And I hate to say this, but they sort of got themselves into a bad situation, if you know what I mean.
Well, he was not prepared to be a leader at all, and he historically, and he was not in the musical. She is the strong one. He is not. He makes bad choices. He has bad influence. And it's a mess. And then she makes bad choices because she's influenced, especially like Grigory, and that's what his name is. It's a musical, but that is the Rasputin character. And they're influenced. He was thrown into this position of leadership. His father dying, and he didn't even want to be a leader. So.
I have done a little research on this.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently his father was Alexander III, who died unexpectedly.
Exactly.
And they had an advisor. I think his name was Witt or Whitty or something,
Mm-hmm.
Witti. And
Mm-hmm.
he tried to get the father to introduce Nicholas into various state affairs.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted him to be the chairman of the Special Committee on Famine Relief. I guess that's a big deal. I don't know. And he was on the Finance Committee and the State Military Council, but those really don't, those sound more like, in America we have these blue ribbon committees. Presidents
Right.
always appoint them for political purposes, and like the Simpson Bowles group,
Right.
none of their proposals were implemented. It's not that big a deal to be the head of a committee, okay? And and all of a sudden he gets thrown into this, and he's the one that moved the wedding up between the two of them, because he really leaned on Alex or Alexandra. He really leaned on her, and he
Right.
wanted to get married to her rather quickly. And of
Mm-hmm.
course, she was not Russian. But I mean, that happens all the time. I mean.
Right. Right. Well, she had to deal with historically, and which they did too, is that she was from that the German and English, and so she was Protestant and had to even change her religious affiliation to marry Nicholas.
Yes, she
So,
had to become
which she
part of the
did.
Orthodox. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right, which she did. That was pretty common when they ended up doing it, but she really struggled. I have her in the story really struggling with that. And but they did all of those things, but they were thrown into this position and just made some very, very bad choices. So,
Yes. Now,
um,
at the beginning of this musical, of this story,
mhm,
you have Nicholas and Alex at
mhm,
age 12 and 16, respectively. They
right,
start writing letters. They had met, and I can't remember it, they had met at some sort of function, some sort of royal function, maybe Queen Victoria's, I don't know, anniversary for how many years she was on the throne. But they had met somewhere in some place, okay?
right, right.
And I think that the Royals had somebody else picked out for Nicholas, but then I believe it's true. You have it historically correct. I think that they
Yeah,
did start exchanging and writing letters.
yes.
And I know that Alex had a sister who had married, I think, one of the Grand Dukes or something along those lines. She had married a Russian also, hadn't she?
Right. Right,
Yes.
right. They all kind of just they ended up intermarrying, and they were looking for, um, someone to, I guess the German English princesses, they kind of prepared them for royalty. So
Yes.
that's exactly what Alexandra was prepared for too. So,
Yeah, and you have it in your story that Nicholas's father was lining up someone else named Helen or Helene, who, as
Helene,
Helene, as you
yeah,
say, was the spoiled French princess. Hmm.
exactly. That's there is some comedy and funny things in here, and again, I said it's a little bit of the fiction lined up with the fact. And actually, Nicholas did date a ballerina, and and was serious about some others, but Helene is the spoiled French princess, and she ends up getting very, very upset with the song that she sings called "Jilted," because Nicholas decided to marry Alexandra, and it was supposed to be all arranged. That she was going to be the future Tsarina.
Yeah,
So, yeah, yeah, and she just throws a fit. She throws a hissy fit. So,
yeah. And what all of a sudden you have in this story of yours,
right,
Rasputin comes on the scene. Okay,
right,
and I think the history books depict him as a wandering sort of nomadic pilgrim in Siberia.
right,
And
right,
he had heard that Alexei, the son of Alexandra and Nicholas, had hemophilia.
right,
And he shows up on the scene because Alexandra was desperate for help. She had lost her brother, she had lost a sister, she had lost a mother when she was young. And she turned to her best friend, some lady named Anna Viborova, to
uh-huh,
secure the help of this peasant healer. He shows up, and some historians feel that he was a hypnotist. And that part of the reason that the child was felt better under his treatment was that he sort of lowered the stress level in the child
right.
and made
He
him feel better.
they she was desperate, and
Yeah.
when he came in, he was this wandering, kind of this alcoholic type that loved his drink as well. And he used different things as, historically there's a lot of theory whether he used hypnotist, he used, or hypnot whatever we say there, hypnotic um, acts, or if he used herbs, or if he, whatever he used. But what was the main thing was that he did bring comfort, and for some reason, the Alexei, he ended up getting better, or he ended up surviving through this, as long as he did. And Alex just depended on him a lot because of that. So
Now, is this musical being performed during right now?
no, it went through the world premiere. It's being sent out. Looking for a couple of producing houses. It's a large musical. The world premiere was done with a 17-member cast that also did some doubles. And specifically, we chose a young cast because it would be excellent not only for larger theaters, but also for some educational colleges and with a young cast. So but I'm looking for some producing houses with our present economy. It's there's not as many looking for new works, and especially with a large work like this. So, but that's where it is right now. Have had some interest that way, so it just takes time.
I went to a Russian-speaking play back in August here in Hollywood, which not Hollywood, California, Hollywood, Florida.
Hollywood, Florida.
And it's a play called The Victim. And I was just on the phone with a Russian American up in Orlando, Florida. And just, put this in your Rolodex. There is a beautiful and wonderful Russian American actress. She goes by the stage name of Olga Vischer, and her real name is Olga Vishnikova. And I went down to see Olga in this play, and it was she had caused a traffic accident in the play, and she had hit an old man, and he had broken his leg or something. And the judge ordered her to do community service by taking care of the old man. And when the old man meets her, they don't get along. Well, of course, she's beautiful and wonderful and young. As time goes on, he falls in love with her. And there are some scenes in there which were very, very moving. And the last scene, she gives him a kiss on the cheek when her community service is over. And she leaves, and it was so moving that I had a headache all the way back to West Palm Beach. And Olga would be perfect to play the role of Alexandra. So if you ever need anybody to play the role, give me a call. I've got somebody for you, okay? And Olga's been on the show. She's terrific. All right.
We need her to see the synopsis and the video on the website, which is TSARINAthemusical.com.
Yes, I looked at your video. It was very nice. Very nice.
Okay, good. Yes. TSARINA is spelled, of course, T-S-A-R-I, TSARINA, T-S-A-R-I-N-A, themusical.com. And there's a synopsis video, and there's a show, just a little demo video from what the live performances were. So
this is terrific. Now, how many actual songs are in this musical?
Oh, you were going to ask me that.
Yes.
I guess I needed to count before we had our interview. Well, there's reprises, however you say that. But probably close to 20 by the time you finish. On the demonstration track, there are 28 tracks with the reprises. So that kind of shows, how many, but there are some repeats in there. So
now you wrote all these songs.
Except the very first one, How Did We Get Here? I wrote with my, I have a music partner that I write with, and we also do headliner shows. I'm a pianist and vocalist, and his name is Waylon Pickard, and we co-wrote the first, and he writes musicals as well. So I'm on one of his, published with Samuel French Publishers. But How Did We Get Here? We co-wrote that song to bookend the show. So it just needed another song. Many musicals, when you, they're a process. I don't know if they're ever done. And we see the musicals now, even with the, Academy Awards and with all of that, they put another song in, they add another song in, usually for the movie. When it's like Les Mis, they added another song. Evita, they added another song for those movies, so they're eligible now for an Academy Award. So musicals just go through those sort of
There's
progressions.
a musical called Mamma Mia, okay? And
Yes,
on the
of course.
screen, I think Meryl Streep was in it, and
Yes,
Pierce Bronson.
yes.
And they had
Right.
that young woman who is, she's cute, that actress. I forget her name. And but was that also performed on Broadway?
Yes, actually, it's been in New York for quite a while, and so it's been definitely on Broadway, and of course, and then made into a movie, as we know. So
I thought that movie was really great. I thought that was
it was really fun. It uses the fun songs, songs, of course, from ABBA, and it's just a lot of fun, and people flock to fun right now too, as well as the serious, because they just need that in their lives.
We play Dancing Queen every day to open this show.
How about that?
Yes.
Now, do you get up? Do you get up? And
I
dance?
would if it would bring in sponsors and listeners. I'd do anything. Okay, I dance, I sing.
But that broadcast, that won't be video.
I could be the next Sammy Davis Jr. if the price is right. Okay.
Oh, hey, I just watched Gene Kelly. I mean, what a talent. I mean, wonderful dance. Yeah. I love dancing. I'm not.
Yeah, he was tremendous. He was tremendous. Okay, now we have this opening song. How did we get here? And Nick and Alex sing that. That must be very moving because they're lamenting the fact that they screwed up everything, and now in the basement, no longer king and queen.
Right. Yeah. They're really questioning. They're still focused in this song. They're still focused on their love. Of course, after a lifetime, our love won't let us down. It will be stronger now that it's come to this. And that's when those shots come. And it's just it's a blackout on stage. It's tragic. So how their life all of their lives ended. So I had to be true to some of the history. You can't just make this a happy-go-lucky. It was tragic. So, and the decisions they made were tragic too. But again, within the musical are some very humorous and light points because of some of the characters. So,
well, he had abdicated in March of 1970. And then he had first been imprisoned at the Alexander Palace, and I can't pronounce this name, Zarkosilo.
Oh, I know. I don't get me to pronounce things. I'll really tear it up. So.
And then they moved him to the governor's mansion in Tobolsk. And finally to this place called Ipatev House in Yekaterinburg. They must have known that something was up because you had the whites now fighting the Reds. And they wanted to restore the monarchy. And one way to ensure that particular monarchy would not be restored was to kill them. Okay?
Yeah, there was that fear. Fear, but there was I left them with hope, though, that they would still have hope. So I didn't want to take away the hope from the musical, from their lives, that there was still, that's why she was, Alexandra was even so influenced by Grigory and by Rasputin, because she was hoping her son would get better. There was always this hope in there. And it, of course, it died then at the end, but I didn't want to leave them without hope, feeling that.
Well, they were ruling over a feudal society, and they weren't smart enough to do what their cousins in England did, was to create a constitutional monarchy. And that's why the monarchy in London is still there, going strong.
Right.
Because they had turned over the real power to a prime minister and to a parliament, which was a good way to do it. But they didn't really turn over. They had a Duma at that time, but it wasn't too powerful.
Yes, they did. Well, and it wasn't run well. No. So they just didn't. made some bad choices. They were unequipped to rule, really, and in their personal lives, and it was their eventual demise, that happened. And revolution, of course, having the influence of Bolshevism and all of that coming on, they were just wide open to that, and there were some chance things that happened that all
Well,
broke
correct
through.
me if I'm wrong. It's hard to keep all these historical figures straight. But yes,
Exactly.
but when they got married, they had something called a wedding feast or something, and the poor people would gather and they would throw bread at them or something. I don't know, something out of Marie Antoinette. But if I'm not mistaken, a lot of people were stampeded to death at their wedding. Or is that them? Or is
Exactly. That was them, and actually, there is a great song called "The Wedding Dance," and it features violin, and of course, I love Christina's playing, and because I'm impartial to violin. I have a grandmother that played Carnegie Hall when she was 16 and graduated from the New York Conservatory, and I love violin. My sister was a violinist, so there's this great song, "Wedding Dance," and it features the violins. But toward the end of it, it goes into a slow section. Everyone turns around because now they're shooting. What happened was, it was horrible. What happened is, they usually on this wedding day, there is the people, the peasants, and everyone on the gates are given bread, and they're given their little gifts. And they were so excited about the new Tsar and Tsarina that they kind of gathered, and it was a huge mob, and a lot of them ended up being stampeded and shot. So that's part of the story, and part of the musical.
Oh, really?
Actually.
Oh, you have that in the musical.
Yeah.
I must
have that in the musical. It's at the end of the wedding dance. It's the slow section of the wedding dance.
Okay, but you say in the synopsis. I realize it's a synopsis. Yes. It's not the book.
Yeah, it's a 2-hour musical.
You say the wedding takes place with a wedding dance, which apparently is an instrumental that you do. Yes. And it turns into chaos as townspeople are killed by guards outside the gates. Okay. Oh, so you have the actual stampede in there also.
Have the actual stampede, on stage. Of course, if a producing house has lots of money for lots of extras and lots of big stage, you can really build that section. But it was to start out their wedding with something like that was just, a tragedy already.
Christina, so, you're still with us, right? Yes.
Yes.
Now, Christina, I have to get a plug in here for myself. Okay, you heard Deborah bring up Carnegie Hall, right? And do you know who designed Carnegie Hall?
Yes, that's your relative.
That's my cousin. Yes, William Tuthill, the architect with the golden ear, Christina. Yes.
Yes, I remember that.
You can have the greatest music in the world, the greatest instrumentalist, the greatest conductor, but you still got to have acoustics. Okay?
You sure do.
That's important. You can't be playing inside a sardine can to sound good. Yep. Yeah.
Wow. So that's your cousin that designed
William Burnett Tuttle. He was with Andrew. He sat next to Andrew Carnegie on opening night, and he went to every corner of the hall and checked the acoustics and the sound. Yep.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that's just a little bit of history. I had to get a plug in for my family. Yes.
Right? Well, you should. You're allowed.
Now, in scene 12, this is something that got beyond my historical knowledge. You say that Nick sings father with Constantine. Who is Constantine?
Okay, Constantine. He is a character we brought in. That was, and it was almost like this. The witty guy that had the advice with his father, that he was carried down. Constantine was also on his father's cabinet, but he ended up carrying down to Alexander, to Nicholas, to be able to give advice and to be able to help guide him through his leadership.
Now, Nicholas
that
was
is who-
pretty shaken up by his father's sudden death, I take it.
He was yes, he was shaken up because he realized then what it meant, and so Constantine came forward to say, "I will help you through this process," as he sings that song "Father," which is a very emotional song, and it's a very poignant song that now he realizes he is the one that has to rule. So
now you point out that they had 4 daughters in a row. Alexei was the youngest child, right? Yeah.
Yes.
And and Alexandra prayed for a son, which I think is true historically. And you have a piece called "The Daughter's Prayer." And why do you call that the daughter's prayer rather than the mother's prayer?
Well, because it focuses on that she's had all of these daughters, but she's praying for a son. So that's why I called it the daughter's prayer. Okay. And her Oksana, who is her the nanny and the her kind of right-hand person in the palace there, that character is she has just had a son who ends up being, and this is fictional, but he ends up marrying one of her daughters in the musical.
I see.
So yeah. So, but she had a son, and so that's why it's called the daughter's prayer, because you've given me. During that song, she has each of her daughters. So, daughter number 1. Okay, now there's daughters. I pray for a son. Oh, but now there's daughter number 2. Oh, now I'm praying for a son again. There's daughter number 3. So it's a song to be able to pass the time. There's a great deal of time that happens because they start when they're young and then they end, of course, in their eventual demise. So there's a great deal of time that passes in this musical, and you have to be able to tell that story and make people believe that time has passed. So between these daughters, she has all 4 of her daughters in this song.
Well, as you know, in American mythology, Anastasia escaped the cellar in Ekaterinburg and lived in the state of Virginia in the United States of America and ended up living next door to Christina Botnari. Okay.
Yeah. Wow. Yes. I didn't know that.
I added something to the mythology there. But as you know, back in the 80s, there was this, I don't know, 70, 80, 90, 100-year-old woman wandering around Virginia, I think, and people were claiming that she was Anastasia. So.
Right. I know there's a lot of myths, but they did recover, the bones and everything. There was very little chance that anyone would have survived that cellar. So.
The odds were not good. That is true.
They were not good. I had to do the research that way. So
now you have her praying, I guess, alongside Mr. Rasputin, and he prophesizes that she will have a son, and also prophesizes that he'll have an affliction, I guess the hemophilia, that he can heal.
Right.
That's a pretty good guy to have on your side. I see why she kept Mr. Rasputin around. He said things that she wanted to hear. Yes.
Oh yeah, he did, and I've from what I've read and studied about this character, he was very confident of his abilities, and I don't know if the wine helped him out that way, but she was desperate too to have that help, and she wanted to hear what he had to say, in the musical. So that she would have a son.
And then I believe that scene 14 in Act 1 is the end. The child is bleeding. Yes. She has kept the news from Nicholas. And you have a song there, "My Son Must Not Die."
Yes. It's a very emotional song. She had she had been so afraid. And in the musical, I had the story that she was even afraid to tell Nicholas what was happening, that, her son was bleeding, and that he had this affliction. So she was desperate, and that's what the song is all about. She is praying pretty much, my son must not die. And of course, it ends with the main characters of Nicholas, Alexandra, and Grigory singing this all together. And now, as Nicholas now finds out at the end of Act One, so it's very emotional. So it kind of leaves us, okay, now what's going to happen? Is he going to die, or what's going to happen? So
yes, this hemophilia was crazy. Apparently, a lot of European royalty in the 1800s and even the 1900s had this. And they claim that Queen Victoria, I think, started it off or something. And she...
Yeah, it came really through her line.
Well, she passed it to two of her 5 daughters, Princess Alice and Princess Beatrice. And then they passed it along to... Everybody intermarried. All these royal people intermarried amongst Spain and all the European countries. And apparently Spain, Germany, and Russia were hit the hardest. And of course, Tsarina Alexandra hailed from Germany, I guess. So,
right,
yes.
She did. Right. So it was she knew that there was that possibility. And when her son started bleeding, and she had to be very careful. I mean, historically had to, and where he went and how he played. And she was just pretty panicked. It was because they intermarried. It was a common disease. And Constantine actually has a little bit where he sings, that he knew the secret. So he's kind of this little, even though he was on, in the musical, he was on the, supposedly such a help to Nicholas. He had his agenda, and he knew about the curse. So, and he knew that the son was bleeding. So, so that's how that Act One ends, with that, again, the desperation